Helen provided no health insurance. What do you think you're doing in here? The sharp voice cut through the silence like a blade. Helen Kane, Christopher's mother, stood in the doorway, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. Her cold blue eyes took in the scene. Nia crouched on the floor, gathering the scattered pills, still wearing her yellow cleaning uniform with Kane Industries embroidered on the pocket. "Mrs. Kane, please, I can explain," Nia whispered, her voice breaking. She knew there was no explanation that would save her job, and losing this job meant losing everything. She and Zoe would be back on the streets within a week. "You're stealing from us. From my son who can barely move from his wheelchair." Helen's voice grew colder. "I'm calling the police. Security will hold you until they arrive." Nia's world crumbled. If she was arrested, what would happen to Zoe? There was no one else. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and Zoe's father had disappeared before she was born. The little girl was home alone right now, sick and waiting for the medicine that would never come. "Please, Mrs. Kane, my daughter is sick. She has a fever that won't break. I only took the expired ones that you throw away anyway. I'll pay you back, I promise. I'll work extra hours, I'll do anything." Tears streamed down Nia's face as she stood up, still clutching the pills. "That's what they all say. Thieves always have sob stories." Helen pulled out her phone. "Tom, call the police. We have a thief in the medical room." At that moment, the front door of the mansion burst open. Little Zoe Washington, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown and bare feet, ran through the massive entryway. Her dark skin was flushed with fever, but her brown eyes burned with determination that seemed impossible for such a small child. "Don't hurt my mama," Zoe said, running to Nia and wrapping her tiny arms around her mother's waist. "She's a good mama. She only wanted to make me better." Helen stepped back, surprised by the child's sudden appearance. "How did you get in here?" "The gates are locked." "I climbed," Zoe said simply, as if scaling a 10-foot security fence was something every 5-year-old could do. She looked up at Helen with those bright brown eyes. "My mama isn't a bad person. She works so hard for you every day. She cleans your big house and never takes anything that's not expired. That doesn't matter. Stealing is stealing." Helen's voice was firm, but something in the child's direct gaze made her hesitate. That's when Christopher Kane wheeled himself into the room. At 35, he was still handsome despite the permanent lines of pain around his green eyes. His dark hair was messy from sleep, and he wore a simple white t-shirt that couldn't hide his muscular arms and chest. The accident 3 years ago had taken his legs but not his presence. Even in a wheelchair he commanded attention. "What's all the noise about?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. Then he saw Nia still holding the pills, her face wet with tears, and the small child clinging to her side. "This woman has been stealing your medication," Helen said. "I caught her red-handed." Christopher looked at Nia, then at Zoe. Something in the little girl's face made him lean forward in his wheelchair. She wasn't crying or scared like most children would be. Instead, she was studying him with an intensity that was unnerving. "Mr. Kane," Zoe said, stepping away from her mother and walking right up to his wheelchair. "I can make you better. I can make your legs work again. But you have to let my mama go free. Don't let them take her to jail." The room fell silent. Helen gasped. Nia reached for her daughter, but Zoe stepped closer to Christopher. "Zoe, honey, come back here," Nia whispered, terrified that her daughter's words would make things worse. But Christopher was staring at the child with something like wonder. "What did you say?" "I said I can heal you. My grandmama taught me before she died. She said I have the gift, but I'm supposed to use it to help good people." Zoe reached out one small hand and placed it on Christopher's knee. "You're hurting inside, not just your legs. I can fix that too." Helen laughed harshly. "This is ridiculous. The child is obviously disturbed. Call security and the police." But Christopher held up his hand. For the first time in 3 years he had felt something. Not in his legs but in his heart. This little girl, standing in his mansion at midnight, making impossible promises while her mother faced arrest, had awakened something he thought was dead. "Wait," he said quietly. "Let her talk." Zoe smiled then, the first real smile any of them had seen from her. "I knew you were good. Mama said you pay her fair and you don't yell at the workers like some rich people do. That's why I want to help you." "Zoe, sweetheart, you can't promise things like that," Nia said, finally finding her voice. "Mr. Kane, I'm so sorry. She's just a child. She doesn't understand." "But what if she does?" Christopher asked, never taking his eyes off Zoe. Something about this moment felt like destiny, like everything in his broken life had led to this. What if she can do what she says? Can a child's innocent faith move mountains? Does love really have the power to heal the impossible? Subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think about Zoe's incredible promise. Do you believe miracles can happen when we least expect them? The tension in the room was thick as Christopher made a decision that would change all their lives. He looked at his mother, then at Nia, then back at the little girl whose hand still rested on his motionless knee. "Here's what we're going to do," he said slowly. "I won't press charges. But you both stay here in the guest wing. If this little miracle worker can do what she claims, then she'll have all the time she needs to try. If not," he shrugged, "at least the child will get proper medical care and you'll have a job." "Christopher, this is insane," Helen protested. "You can't seriously believe." "I don't know what I believe anymore, Mother. But I'm willing to find out." He looked at Nia. "What do you say? Will you accept my offer?" Nia looked down at her daughter, who was nodding eagerly, then at the medicine in her hands that could save Zoe's life tonight. She thought about the streets, about having nowhere to go, about the chance for her daughter to be safe and healthy. "Yes," she whispered. "We accept." "Thank you." Zoe clapped her hands together. "I promise I'll make you walk again, Mr. Christopher. And I'll make you smile too. You haven't smiled in a long time." As Christopher looked into the child's confident face, he felt the first flutter of hope he'd experienced since the accident. Maybe it was impossible. Maybe he was crazy to believe a 5-year-old could heal 3 years of paralysis and despair. But as Zoe's small hand remained on his knee, he could swear he felt warmth spreading through his dead legs. For the first time in years, Christopher Kane allowed himself to hope for a miracle. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Christopher Kane's study as he sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing the legal documents his assistant Tom Bradley had prepared. Across from him, Nia sat nervously on the edge of a leather chair, while Zoe explored the room with the fearless curiosity of a child who had just been given permission to touch everything. "Look, Mama, he has books that reach the ceiling," Zoe said, running her fingers along the leather spines. "Do you think he's read them all?" "Most of them," Christopher answered, surprising himself by engaging with the child. He had avoided children since his accident, finding their energy and hope too painful to bear. But something about Zoe was different. She looked at him without pity, without the careful politeness that other people used around him. Tom Bradley, a middle-aged man with graying temples and a perpetually worried expression, cleared his throat. "Mr. Kane, are you sure about this arrangement? Having unauthorized personnel live in the main house creates liability issues." "They're not unauthorized anymore," Christopher said firmly. "Mrs. Washington is now employed as a private household assistant, with full benefits including health insurance for her and her daughter. They'll live in the East Wing guest suite." Nia's eyes widened. "Mr. Kane, that's too generous. I don't deserve." "You'll earn it," he said simply. "Your daughter made me a promise last night. I'm giving her the chance to keep it. In return, you'll help coordinate my daily care routine with the medical staff." Dr. Patricia Williams, who had arrived early that morning to examine Zoe and ensure the child was healthy, looked up from her chart. She was a kind-faced African-American woman in her 40s who had been treating Christopher since his accident. "The little one is fine now. Her fever broke completely during the night, which is remarkable recovery time." "See? I told you I was getting better," Zoe said, climbing onto the chair next to her mother. "Grandmama's spirit was watching over me. She always said I have healing hands like she did." Helen Kane entered the room, carrying a silver tea tray with obvious reluctance. She had made her disapproval clear at breakfast, but Christopher had overruled her objections. "Your tea, Christopher. And something for our guests." "Thank you, Mother." Christopher noticed how Nia immediately stood to take the tray from Helen, her instincts still those of a servant despite her new position. "Let me help you with that, Mrs. Kane," Nia said gratefully. Helen allowed it, but her expression remained cool. "I still think this is a mistake, Christopher. Letting emotions override good judgment." "Sometimes good judgment is overrated," Christopher replied, watching Zoe, who had pulled out a small cloth bag from her nightgown pocket. "What's in the bag, Zoe?" "Herbs and things Grandmama taught me about. She said every person has different healing needs." Zoe opened the bag and pulled out dried leaves, small roots, and what looked like crushed flowers. She showed me which ones help with pain and which ones help with sadness. Dr. Williams leaned forward with professional interest. "Where did your grandmother learn about herbal medicine?" "She grew up in Louisiana with her grandmama, who learned from her grandmama," Zoe explained matter-of-factly. "The knowledge goes way back. Grandmama said the gift skips generations sometimes, but it chose me." "And what exactly is this gift?" Tom asked skeptically. Zoe looked at him with those serious brown eyes. I can feel what hurts in people. And I know what will make it better. Not just body hurts but heart hurts too. She turned to Christopher. You have both kinds? The room fell quiet. Christopher felt exposed, as if this child could see right through the walls he had built around his pain. And you think you can fix both? I know I can. But you have to let me try. And you have to want to get better. Zoe walked over to his wheelchair and placed her small hands on his forearms. Do you want to get better, Mr. Christopher? For 3 years, Christopher had told himself he had accepted his limitations. He had built his life around being paralyzed, convinced himself that walking again was an impossible dream. But looking into Zoe's confident face, he felt something crack open inside his chest. Yes, he whispered. I want to get better. Zoe smiled that radiant smile again. Good. We'll start today. But first, you need to show Mama and me where we're going to live. I want to see if the windows get good sun for growing herbs. As if it were the most natural thing in the world, Zoe took control of Christopher's wheelchair and began pushing him toward the door. Come on, Mama. Mr. Christopher is going to show us our new home. Nia hurried to follow, still overwhelmed by how quickly their lives had changed. Yesterday they had nothing. Today they had more than she had ever dared to dream. Mrs. Washington, Helen called as they reached the door. A word of advice. Don't let that child fill my son with false hope. He's been through enough disappointment. Nia turned back, meeting Helen's stern gaze with quiet dignity. Mrs. Kane, I understand your concern. But I've learned not to underestimate my daughter. She's already healed things I thought were impossible. Such as my broken heart, Nia said simply. After her father left and my mother died, I thought I'd never trust in goodness again. But Zoe taught me that miracles happen when you're brave enough to believe in them. As they left the study, Christopher found himself being pushed through his own mansion by a 5-year-old who chattered constantly about healing herbs and her grandmother's wisdom. For the first time since his accident, he wasn't thinking about what he couldn't do. Instead, he was wondering what might be possible. The East Wing guest suite was larger than any apartment Nia had ever lived in. It had 2 bedrooms, a sitting area, and a small kitchen. But what caught Zoe's attention immediately were the floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the garden. Perfect, she announced, pressing her face against the glass. The morning sun will be good for growing medicine plants. Can we plant a garden, Mr. Christopher? I don't see why not, he said, realizing that he was already thinking about how to accommodate her request. And can you eat dinner with us sometimes? Mama makes really good food and eating alone makes the sad feeling stronger. Christopher glanced at Nia, who was blushing. I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be imposing, Christopher said, surprising himself again. I'd like that. As they settled into their new life, Christopher began to understand that he hadn't just accepted a child's promise to heal him. He had opened his door to something much more powerful, the possibility of becoming a family. That evening, as Zoe placed her small hands on his legs and began what she called the first healing, Christopher felt warmth spread through his body. Whether it was real or imagined, he didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. 3 days later, the east wing of the Kane mansion had been transformed. Nia's few possessions, carefully arranged in the spacious rooms, made the suite feel like a real home. Zoe had claimed the smaller bedroom, decorating it with drawings of flowers and healing herbs that she planned to grow in their garden. Christopher found himself wheeling through the main house more often than necessary, always finding excuses to pass by their wing. He told himself he was checking on their progress, but the truth was simpler. Their presence had brought life back to a house that had felt like a tomb. This morning, he discovered Zoe in the mansion's greenhouse, kneeling beside old gardener Pete Thompson. Pete was a weathered man in his 70s who had worked for the Kane family for 30 years. He was holding his gnarled hands out to Zoe, who was examining his fingers with the serious concentration of a doctor. These hands hurt you when it rains, Zoe was saying, her small fingers tracing the swollen joints. And when you try to hold the heavy tools. Pete nodded, impressed despite his natural skepticism. That's right, little one. Arthritis has been bothering me for years. Gets worse every winter. My grandmama had the same problem. She taught me about this. Zoe reached into her ever-present herb bag and pulled out what looked like dried willow bark. We need to make this into tea, and then I'll show you how to rub your hands the special way. Christopher wheeled closer, fascinated. Pete, you don't have to humor her if you're not comfortable. Actually, Mr. Kane, I'm curious, Pete said, his weathered face kind as he looked at Zoe. My grandmother used to use willow bark for pain back in Ireland. How did you know about that, young miss? Grandmama said the old knowledge is the best knowledge. Plants knew how to help people long before there were doctors. Zoe began explaining how to steep the bark, her words a mixture of childlike simplicity and surprising wisdom. As Christopher watched, he noticed his mother standing in the greenhouse doorway, observing the scene with reluctant interest. Helen had been avoiding Nia and Zoe since their arrival, making her disapproval clear through cold silence. "She's quite articulate for a 5-year-old, Helen said, approaching Christopher's wheelchair. "Yes, she is." Christopher couldn't hide his growing affection for the child. Yesterday she helped Mrs. Rodriguez with her headaches. Did something with lavender oil and pressure points. Helen frowned. "Christopher, you need to be careful. This child might be gifted, but she's not a doctor. What if she gives someone the wrong advice? What if she gives someone the right advice?" Christopher countered. "Pete's been in pain for years. If Zoe can help him feel better, what's the harm?" Their conversation was interrupted by Nia entering the greenhouse, carrying a tray of sandwiches and lemonade. She had taken over many of the kitchen duties, insisting that earning her keep meant more than just sitting in the guest suite. "I thought everyone might be hungry," she said, setting the tray on Pete's potting table. "Zoe, honey, are you bothering Mr. Pete?" "She's not bothering me at all," Pete said firmly. "Matter of fact, she's been more help than any of those expensive doctors. Look here." He flexed his fingers, and Christopher could see that the swelling had already gone down slightly. "That's impossible," Helen said. "It's only been 20 minutes. Sometimes healing starts the moment someone believes it can happen," Zoe said solemnly. She walked over to Helen and studied her face. "You have headaches too. Right here." She pointed to her own temple. "And your stomach hurts sometimes when you're worried about Mr. Christopher." Helen stepped back, startled. "How could you possibly know that?" "It shows in your face. And in how you stand. Grandmama taught me to see the signs." Zoe reached for Helen's hand. "I can help you too if you want." For a moment Helen's stern expression softened. Christopher could see the longing in her eyes, the desire to believe that something good might come from this strange situation. But then her walls went back up. "Thank you, but I prefer traditional medicine," she said politely but firmly. Zoe nodded as if she had expected that response. "That's okay. Sometimes people need time to trust. I'll be here when you're ready." The simple acceptance in the child's voice made Christopher's chest tighten. When had he forgotten that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken, but about patience and love and giving people space to hope? That afternoon, Christopher found himself in the library with Nia while Zoe napped. Nia was organizing his medical files, her movements efficient but careful. She had taken to the work naturally, bringing an order to his care routine that had been missing. "She's remarkable," Christopher said, watching Nia work. "Your daughter. I've never met a child like her." Nia smiled, the expression transforming her face from pretty to beautiful. "She's been special since she was born. Even as a baby, she seemed to understand things that other children didn't." "How did you manage on your own? Raising someone like that must have been challenging." "It was scary sometimes," Nia admitted, sitting down across from his desk. "After her father left, I worried that I wasn't enough for her. A child with gifts needs guidance, and I was just a 19-year-old girl with no education and no money. But you did it. You kept her safe and helped her gifts grow. My mother helped until she got sick. And Zoe's great-grandmother, before she passed when Zoe was 3. She's the one who taught Zoe about the herbs and the healing touch." Nia's expression grew sad. "I just hope I'm doing right by her now." "What do you mean?" "This." Nia gestured around the elegant library. "This life is so far beyond what we've ever known. What if I'm letting her make promises she can't keep? What if I'm setting you both up for heartbreak?" Christopher was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question that had been haunting him too. "I've been paralyzed for 3 years, Nia. I've tried every treatment, seen every specialist. I've accepted that I'll never walk again." He paused, meeting her worried eyes. "But something changed the night Zoe put her hand on my knee. Not in my legs, but in here." He touched his chest. "For the first time in 3 years, I felt alive again. What if her healing doesn't work the way she thinks it will? Then at least I'll have learned what it feels like to hope again. And maybe that's healing enough." That evening, Zoe insisted on beginning what she called Christopher's real healing treatments. She had spent the afternoon preparing a mixture of herbs and oils, following recipes that seemed far too complex for a 5-year-old to remember. "Grandmama always said that nighttime is when the body does its deepest healing," Zoe explained as she arranged her supplies in Christopher's bedroom. "We need to work with your energy when it's quiet and ready to change." Christopher transferred from his wheelchair to his bed, wearing shorts so that Zoe could access his legs. Nia sat nearby, ready to help if needed, though she still looked nervous about the whole process. "This might feel tingly," Zoe warned, rubbing an oil mixture into her palms. "Grandmama said that means the sleeping parts are starting to wake up." As Zoe placed her hands on Christopher's legs and began what seemed like a combination of massage and something more mystical, Christopher tried to remain skeptical. But within minutes he felt warmth spreading through his thighs, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his accident. "Do you feel that?" Zoe asked, her young face serious with concentration. "Yes," Christopher whispered, afraid to believe it was real. "Good. That means your body remembers how to heal. We just have to remind it every day." As Zoe worked, humming a song her grandmother had taught her, Christopher caught Nia's eyes. The love and worry in her expression touched something deep in his chest. This brave, beautiful woman had trusted him with her most precious gift, and he was beginning to understand that Zoe wasn't the only miracle that had walked into his life. For the first time since his accident, Christopher Kane fell asleep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. 2 weeks into their new life at the mansion, word had spread among the staff about Zoe's unusual abilities. What had started as curiosity had become genuine amazement as, one by one, the household employees began seeking out the little girl for help with their various ailments. Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, the head housekeeper, was the first to become a true believer. Her chronic migraines, which had plagued her for 15 years, had completely disappeared after just 3 sessions with Zoe. The child had used a combination of peppermint oil, gentle pressure points, and what she called happy energy, to heal pain that expensive medications had only temporarily masked. "Senor Kane," Mrs. Rodriguez said as she served Christopher his morning coffee in the sunroom, "that little angel, she is a gift from God. My headaches are gone, completely gone. And my husband's back pain too." Christopher looked up from his tablet where he had been reviewing quarterly reports. "Her husband too?" "See. Miguel works construction, you know. His back has been bad for years. Little Zoe, she came to our house on Saturday with her mama, and she showed him exercises, gave him special tea. He woke up Sunday morning with no pain for the first time in months." This was happening throughout the estate. The gardening staff reported that Pete Thompson was moving like a man 20 years younger. The security guards mentioned that their colleague James, who had suffered from insomnia since his military service, was finally sleeping through the night after Zoe taught him a breathing technique her great-grandmother had known. Christopher found himself both amazed and slightly worried. The rational part of his mind insisted that these improvements were likely coincidental, or perhaps psychosomatic. But he couldn't ignore the evidence of his own body. After 2 weeks of Zoe's nightly treatments, he was experiencing sensations in his legs that his doctors had sworn would never return. He discovered Zoe in the kitchen that afternoon, standing on a step stool while helping Mrs. Rodriguez prepare lunch. The 5-year-old was carefully measuring herbs into a pot of soup, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "What are you making?" Christopher asked, wheeling closer to the stove. "Healing soup," Zoe announced proudly. "It has special ingredients that help people feel strong and happy. Mrs. Rodriguez is teaching me how to cook, and I'm teaching her about healing herbs." "Is a good trade," Mrs. Rodriguez laughed. "She knows more about plantas medicinals than my own grandmother did." Nia entered the kitchen carrying fresh linens from the laundry. Over the past 2 weeks, she had naturally evolved into the household coordinator, managing Christopher's schedule, organizing his medical appointments, and ensuring that the staff's various needs were met. She moved with quiet efficiency, but Christopher had begun to notice the way she lit up whenever she entered a room where he was present. "Zoe, sweetheart, don't wear out Mrs. Rodriguez with all your questions," Nia said, but her tone was affectionate. "She's no trouble at all," Mrs. Rodriguez assured her. "This one, she has the gift of making everything better just by being here." It was true. The entire mansion felt different since Nia and Zoe had arrived. The staff moved with more energy, there was more laughter in the hallways, and even the formal dining room had become a place where people gathered to share meals and stories. Christopher's mother had been observing these changes with growing confusion. That evening, she joined him in his study for their usual after-dinner discussion of business matters. "I have to admit I'm surprised," Helen said, settling into her usual chair with a cup of tea. "The household has never run more smoothly. That Washington woman has a natural talent for organization." "Nia," Christopher corrected gently. "Her name is Nia." "Yes, Nia." Helen paused, clearly struggling with something. "And the child? I've been watching her with the staff. Whatever she's doing, it's certainly effective." But you still don't believe in her healing abilities. Helen was quiet for a moment. I had another headache today. The kind that usually lasts for hours. She met Christopher's eyes. The little one approached me in the garden. She said she could see the pain in my face and asked if she could help. I almost said no, but you let her try. She placed her hands on my temples and hummed a little song. It was the strangest thing, Christopher. The pain just melted away. Within minutes, I felt better than I had all week. Christopher felt a surge of affection for both his mother and the remarkable child who was slowly healing their entire household. What do you think that means? I don't know, Helen admitted. I've always believed in science, in logic, in things that can be measured and explained. But what's happening here? She shook her head. Either I'm losing my mind or that little girl has a gift that defies everything I thought I knew about the world. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of laughter from the hallway. Through the open door, they could see Zoe sitting on the floor with Tom Bradley, showing him how to stretch his wrists to relieve the pain from years of computer work. Mr. Tom, you have to breathe deep when you do it, Zoe was explaining patiently. The breathing is what carries the healing to the right places. Tom, who was usually all business, was following her instructions with the seriousness of a student. Like this? Perfect. Grandmama said that everyone can learn to heal themselves a little bit. They just need someone to show them how. Christopher wheeled to the doorway, watching as his normally stressed assistant visibly relaxed under Zoe's gentle guidance. Feeling better, Tom? Actually, yes, Tom said, flexing his fingers with surprise. I've been dealing with carpal tunnel pain for months. This is the first time it's felt normal. After Tom left, Zoe bounded over to Christopher's wheelchair. Are you ready for your treatment tonight? I made a new oil mixture that Grandmama showed me in my dream. Christopher felt his heart skip. She spoke to you in a dream? She does that sometimes. She told me that your legs are almost ready to remember how to work. But she said the most important healing is happening in your heart. As they made their way to his bedroom for the nightly treatment, Christopher reflected on how much had changed. Not just in his body, though the improvements there were undeniable. The constant ache in his chest had eased. The anger that had consumed him since his accident had transformed into something gentler. Hope, gratitude, and a growing love for the two people who had brought light back into his darkness. That night, as Zoe worked her gentle magic on his legs, Christopher felt sensation extending further down than ever before. When he mentioned it to her, she just smiled. Tomorrow will be even better, she said confidently. Grandmama says you're going to surprise yourself soon. As Christopher drifted off to sleep, he found himself believing that maybe, just maybe, a 5-year-old girl and her incredible gift might accomplish what years of medical treatment had failed to do. More than that, he was beginning to believe that the greatest healing happening in the Kane mansion wasn't physical at all. It was the healing of hearts learning to love again. A month had passed since Nia and Zoe had moved into the Kane mansion, and the changes in Christopher were remarkable. He had regained feeling in both legs down to his knees, and his physical therapy sessions with Dr. Williams had become exercises in cautious optimism rather than routine maintenance. But with each miracle came growing fear in Nia's heart. She stood in the kitchen window, watching Zoe work in their herb garden with Pete Thompson. The little girl moved among the plants like she had been born to tend them, her small hands coaxing growth from seeds that had seemed too old to sprout. Christopher sat nearby in his wheelchair, his face more animated than Nia had ever seen it as he listened to Zoe explain the properties of each healing plant. You're worried, Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, joining Nia at the window. Every day I wake up afraid this will be the day it all ends, Nia admitted. That Zoe won't be able to help him anymore, or that he'll realize we don't belong in this world. That man, he looks at you like you hung the moon, Mrs. Rodriguez observed. And little Zoe, she has brought life back to this house. Why would he want you to leave? Nia turned away from the window, unable to voice her deepest fear. She had worked for wealthy families before, and she knew how quickly kindness could turn to dismissal when the novelty wore off. But this felt different, more dangerous to her heart. She was falling in love with Christopher Kane, and that terrified her more than poverty ever had. What scared her most was that he might be falling in love with her too. I need to check on the medical supply inventory, she said, changing the subject as she always did when her feelings became too overwhelming. That afternoon, while Zoe napped and Christopher was in his office dealing with business calls, Nia found herself in the mansion's library. She had started coming here during quiet moments, drawn to the thousands of books that represented a world of knowledge she had never been able to access. Finding anything interesting? Christopher's voice made her jump. She hadn't heard his wheelchair approaching. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb your books, she said, immediately moving to replace the volume of poetry she had been reading. You're not disturbing anything. This library should be used. He moved closer, noticing the book in her hands. William Wordsworth? I don't know much about poetry, Nia admitted, embarrassed. I just liked how the words sounded. Read to me, Christopher said, settling his wheelchair near the window seat where she had been sitting. Oh, I couldn't. You probably know these poems already. Please. I'd like to hear how they sound to you. Reluctantly, Nia opened to the page she had been reading. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er valleys and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. As she continued reading, Christopher found himself watching her face more than listening to the familiar words. There was something beautiful about the way she approached the poetry, hesitant but genuine. She read like someone discovering treasure. That was lovely, he said when she finished. You have a beautiful voice. Thank you. She looked down at the book, suddenly shy. I never had much chance for reading before. Between work and taking care of Zoe. What did you want to be? Before life got complicated? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her about dreams beyond survival. I used to think about being a teacher. When I was little, I loved helping other kids with their homework. But after I got pregnant with Zoe? You gave up your dreams to take care of her. It wasn't giving up. It was choosing what mattered most. She met his eyes. Just like you're choosing to believe in her gift, even though it might not work the way she promises. Christopher was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? I've been thinking about what happens after Zoe heals me. If she heals me. Nia's stomach clenched. This was what she had been afraid of. Once Christopher was walking again, he wouldn't need them anymore. What do you mean? I mean, what comes next for us? For all of us? The weight of that question hung between them. Nia stood up, suddenly needing distance. I suppose we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Nia, wait. There was something urgent in his voice. I need you to know something. What's happening between us? It's not because you're helping me or because Zoe is healing me. It's because you're both extraordinary people who have reminded me what it feels like to be alive. Mr. Kane? Christopher. Please. Christopher, I can't do this. The words came out more harshly than she intended. I can't let myself believe in fairy tales. I have Zoe to think about. When this is over, when you're walking again and living your real life, will just be reminders of when you were broken. I've seen how this story ends. Have you? Because I think you're wrong about the ending. Before she could respond, Zoe burst into the library, her face flushed with excitement. Mama, Mr. Christopher, come quick. Something amazing happened in the garden. They followed her outside, where Pete Thompson was standing near the tool shed with tears streaming down his weathered face. In his hands, he held a heavy pair of pruning shears that would have been impossible for him to grip just a month earlier. I can use both hands, he said wonderingly. For the first time in 5 years, I can grip tools with both hands. No pain, no stiffness, nothing. Zoe beamed with pride. I told you the arthritis was going to go away completely. Grandmama said it would take time, but your hands were ready to remember how to be strong. Christopher felt a familiar tingle in his legs as he watched Pete demonstrate his renewed dexterity. Each healing Zoe performed seemed to strengthen her gift, and each success made Christopher more confident about his own recovery. But when he looked at Nia, he saw fear where there should have been joy. She was watching Pete with a tight expression, as if each miracle brought them closer to some dreaded conclusion. That evening, after Zoe had performed her nightly treatment and fallen asleep in her own bed, Christopher found Nia sitting on the terrace outside their guest suite. She was staring up at the stars with the same distant look she had worn all afternoon. Talk to me, he said, wheeling his chair next to her bench. About what? About why you're afraid of me getting better. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. Because when you can walk again, you won't need us anymore. You'll go back to your real life and will just be a nice memory of the time a little girl helped you believe in miracles. What if I don't want to go back to my old life? What if you do? What if you wake up one morning and realize that a cleaning woman and her strange little daughter don't fit into the world you really belong to? Christopher was quiet, understanding for the first time the depth of her fear. She wasn't just worried about losing their current situation. She was protecting herself from believing in a future that seemed too good to be true. Nia, look at me. When she finally met his eyes, he continued. I don't want my old life back. That man was angry, closed off, and alone. The man I'm becoming, the man your daughter is helping me be, wants something completely different. What does he want? A family. A real family with people who love each other and take care of each other. People who believe in miracles and make them happen every day. Tears slipped down Nia's cheeks. You can't promise that. Tomorrow you might feel different. Then I'll spend every tomorrow proving that today was real. As Christopher reached for her hand, Nia felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. Maybe it was time to stop preparing for disaster and start believing in the possibility of joy. After all, if her 5-year-old daughter could make paralyzed legs remember how to feel, maybe she could learn to trust in happy endings too. Looking up at the stars, Nia allowed herself to hope that this miracle might be the one that lasted forever. 6 weeks into their stay at the mansion, Christopher's progress had begun to attract attention beyond the household staff. Dr. Williams had documented the return of sensation to his legs and had quietly shared his case with colleagues, though she was careful not to mention Zoe's role in his recovery. This morning, Christopher sat in the mansion's conservatory with Zoe, who had insisted on conducting what she called the most important lesson yet. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, illuminating the tropical plants that thrived in the humid environment. Today we're going to work on the connection between your heart and your legs, Zoe announced, arranging her herbs and oils with the precision of a tiny pharmacist. Grandmama says that sometimes the body forgets how to work because the heart forgets how to hope. And what do you think happened to my heart? Christopher asked, fascinated as always by the child's insights. Zoe studied his face with those serious brown eyes. It got scared when your legs stopped working. So it closed up tight to protect itself. But closed hearts can't send healing energy to the rest of the body. How do you know all this? Did your grandmother really teach you these things, or do you just know them somehow? Both, Zoe said simply. Grandmama taught me the herb recipes and the hand positions. But the knowing about feelings and healing, that comes from inside. She said I was born with it, like some people are born knowing how to sing pretty songs. Christopher watched as she mixed oils in a small bowl, adding drops with the careful measurement of a chemist. What happened to your grandmother? She got sick and went to be with the angels when I was 3. But before she died, she put her hands on my head and said all her healing knowledge would stay with me. Zoe looked up from her work. Sometimes I dream about her and she teaches me new things. Like the special technique I'm going to try today. What kind of technique? It's called heart opening. Grandmama showed me how to help people let go of the scared feelings that keep their bodies from healing. Nia appeared in the conservatory doorway, carrying a tray of Christopher's morning medications. Over the weeks, she had seamlessly integrated into his care routine, managing his medical schedule while supporting Zoe's healing work. How are my 2 healers doing? She asked, setting the tray on a nearby table. Mama, look how much better Mr. Christopher's legs are, Zoe said proudly. She had Christopher lift his legs slightly from the wheelchair footrests, demonstrating the improved muscle control he had regained. Nia's face lit up with genuine joy at his progress. That's amazing, Christopher. Dr. Williams must be thrilled. She's documenting everything, Christopher agreed. Though she's having trouble explaining the improvements in medical terms. Some things don't need explaining, Zoe said wisely. They just need believing. As Zoe began her treatment, placing her small hands on Christopher's legs and closing her eyes in concentration, Christopher found himself studying Nia's face. The fear that had shadowed her expression for weeks seemed to be lifting, replaced by something that looked like cautious hope. I can feel your heart opening, Zoe murmured, her hands moving in gentle patterns along Christopher's thighs. The scared feelings are getting smaller. Christopher felt warmth spreading through his legs, but more than that, he felt a lightness in his chest that had been absent for years. The constant tension he had carried since his accident was melting away under Zoe's touch. Now think about something that makes you really happy, Zoe instructed, never opening her eyes. Without hesitation, Christopher's gaze went to Nia. She was watching the treatment with complete focus, her hands clasped together as if she were praying. The sight of her believing in her daughter's gift, supporting Christopher's healing with such fierce love, filled him with a happiness more profound than anything he had experienced. Good, Zoe whispered. I can feel the happy energy going all the way to your feet now. And incredibly, Christopher could feel it too. Sensation was flowing through his legs like warm honey, reaching places that had been numb for 3 years. His toes, which hadn't moved since his accident, gave the faintest twitch. Nia gasped. Did you see that? Christopher, your foot moved. Christopher stared down at his feet in amazement. Zoe, did you feel that happen? I felt your whole body wake up, Zoe said, opening her eyes with a satisfied smile. The connection is getting stronger. Pretty soon your legs will remember everything they used to know. That afternoon, while Zoe napped, Christopher found himself able to spend longer periods standing with the support of parallel bars in his physical therapy room. The improvement was dramatic enough that Nia called Dr. Williams to schedule an emergency consultation. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Williams said after examining Christopher's legs and reviewing his latest test results. "The nerve regeneration is happening at a pace I've never seen in cases like yours. What do you think is causing it?" Nia asked, though she already knew the answer. Dr. Williams looked thoughtful. "Medically speaking, I should say it's a spontaneous recovery. But I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, and I've learned that sometimes healing happens in ways that textbooks can't explain." She looked at Nia directly. "Your daughter has a remarkable gift. Whatever she's doing, it's working." That evening, as the household staff gathered in the kitchen for dinner, news of Christopher's breakthrough spread through the room like wildfire. Pete Thompson raised his glass of water in a toast. "To little Zoe," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who reminds us all that miracles aren't just stories in old books." "To Zoe," the staff chorused, and the child blushed with pleased embarrassment. Helen Kane, who had joined them for dinner more frequently as her initial resistance to Zoe crumbled, watched the celebration with tears in her eyes. "I owe you all an apology," she said, addressing Nia and Zoe directly. "I doubted what I couldn't understand. But watching my son become whole again, watching this entire household transform with love and hope, I was wrong to resist." "You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Kane," Nia said gently. "Love sometimes takes time to trust." Later that night, as Zoe performed her usual healing treatment, she seemed more focused than ever. Her small hands moved with increasing confidence along Christopher's legs, and she hummed the melody her grandmother had taught her. "Mr. Christopher," she said softly, "I think tomorrow might be the day you take your first step." Christopher felt his heart race. "Do you really think so?" "I know so. Your body is ready and your heart is open. Grandmama visited my dreams again last night, and she said the healing is almost complete." As Zoe tucked her hands under the blanket and prepared to leave, she paused and looked at him with unusual seriousness. "But Mr. Christopher, when you can walk again, you have to promise me something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Promise you'll use your legs to do good things. To help other people who need healing. Grandmama says gifts are meant to be shared." Christopher reached out and took her small hand in his. "I promise, Zoe. And I know exactly where I want to start." He looked toward the door where Nia was waiting to walk Zoe back to their suite, and he knew that his first steps would be toward the woman who had captured his heart. The woman he wanted to walk beside for the rest of his life. As Christopher fell asleep that night, he dreamed of walking through a garden filled with healing herbs, with Nia by his side and Zoe running ahead of them, her laughter carrying on the wind like a promise of all the miracles yet to come. The next morning brought an unseasonably warm October day, and Christopher woke with an unusual sensation in his legs. Not just the tingling he had grown accustomed to, but something stronger, an almost electric energy that seemed to pulse through his muscles. He transferred to his wheelchair and made his way to the dining room, where Nia and Zoe were already having breakfast. Zoe looked up from her oatmeal with knowing eyes. "Today's the day," she announced matter-of-factly, as if she were commenting on the weather. "The day for what?" Nia asked, though something in her daughter's tone made her set down her coffee cup. "The day Mr. Christopher remembers how to walk," Zoe said, returning to her breakfast as if she hadn't just predicted a miracle. Christopher felt his heart jump. "Zoe, are you sure? I told you last night. Your body is ready." She pointed to his legs with her spoon. "Can't you feel the energy jumping around in there?" He could. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced since his accident, as if his legs were full of electricity waiting to be released. "Should we call Dr. Williams?" Nia asked, her voice tight with nervous excitement. "Let's wait and see what happens," Christopher said, not wanting to jinx the moment with too much medical scrutiny. After breakfast, they gathered in Christopher's physical therapy room, which had been equipped with parallel bars, mats and other rehabilitation equipment. Tom Bradley had heard about the morning's prediction and joined them, along with Mrs. Rodriguez and Pete Thompson. Even Helen had come, though she stood near the back with an expression of anxious hope. "Now, don't push too hard," Dr. Williams cautioned as she checked Christopher's vital signs. She had arrived within an hour of Nia's call, bringing portable equipment to monitor his progress. Zoe positioned herself in front of Christopher's wheelchair, her small hands resting on his knees. "Remember, Mr. Christopher, your legs know how to do this. They just forgot for a while. I'm going to help them remember." She closed her eyes and began humming the same melody she used during her treatments. Christopher felt warmth spreading through his legs, followed by the strongest sensation he had experienced since his accident. His muscles seemed to be waking up, responding to signals from his brain that had been blocked for 3 years. "I can feel everything," he whispered, amazement clear in his voice. "All the way to my toes." "Now try to stand," Zoe instructed, stepping back but keeping her eyes fixed on his face. Christopher gripped the armrests of his wheelchair and slowly shifted his weight forward. For the first time in 3 years, his legs responded when he asked them to bear weight. With tremendous effort and the support of the parallel bars, he pushed himself upright. The room fell silent except for the sound of several people holding their breath. Christopher stood there, trembling with effort but undeniably standing on his own legs. Tears streamed down his face as he looked around the room at the people who had become his family. "I'm standing," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I'm actually standing." Nia had her hands pressed to her mouth, tears flowing freely. Helen was openly sobbing. Even Tom Bradley, usually so composed, wiped his eyes with his handkerchief. "Now take a step," Zoe said gently. "Just one small step toward me." Christopher looked down at the little girl who had changed his life. Her face was radiant with confidence and love, and he knew that if anyone could guide him through this moment, it was her. Holding tightly to the parallel bars, Christopher lifted his right foot and moved it forward 6 inches. The movement was shaky and required enormous concentration, but it was undeniably a step. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying and laughing at the same time. Pete Thompson kept saying, blessed child," over and over. But Christopher only had eyes for Nia. She was staring at him with such love and pride that he felt his heart might burst. "Another one," Zoe encouraged. "You can do it." Christopher took another step, then another. His movements were careful and supported, but they were real steps. By the time he had walked the length of the parallel bars, everyone in the room was crying. "How do you feel?" Dr. Williams asked, immediately checking his responses and reflexes. "Like I've been given my life back," Christopher said, settling back into his wheelchair to rest. The effort had exhausted him, but it was the most satisfying exhaustion he had ever experienced. Zoe climbed onto his lap and hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Mr. Christopher. Grandmama is proud too." I can feel her smiling. That evening, as the excitement of the day settled into quiet celebration, Christopher found himself alone with Nia on the terrace outside their wing of the mansion. The October air was cool and she had wrapped herself in a soft sweater. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream," she said softly. "Which part? My walking or all of it?" "All of it. This house, this life you..." She paused. "The way you look at me." Christopher moved his wheelchair closer to her bench. "How do I look at you? Like I'm someone worth loving." The vulnerability in her voice made Christopher's chest tighten. "Nia, you are worth loving. You're worth everything." She turned to face him, and in the moonlight, he could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. "But what happens now? You're going to be walking soon, really walking. Your life is going to change." "Yes, it is. And I want you and Zoe to be part of that change." "What do you mean?" Christopher took a deep breath, knowing that what he said next would determine the rest of their lives. "I mean, I'm in love with you. I'm in love with your strength, your kindness, your fierce protection of Zoe. I'm in love with the way you read poetry and the way you make everyone around you feel valued. I'm in love with the life we've built together." Nia's eyes filled with tears. "Christopher, I know this is fast. I know we're from different worlds. But some things are worth taking risks for. You and Zoe are worth any risk." "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've never had anything this good in my life. I don't know how to believe it's real." "Then let me show you every day that it's real. Let me love you both the way you deserve to be loved." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Finally, Nia spoke. "When I was a little girl, I used to dream about being rescued by a prince. But I gave up on fairy tales a long time ago." "This isn't a fairy tale," Christopher said gently. "This is better. This is real life, with real people who choose to love each other despite all the reasons they could find not to." Nia looked at him for a long time, seeing not the wealthy man in the wheelchair, but the person he had become over these weeks. Someone gentle, generous, and genuinely good. Someone who had opened his heart and his home to them without reservation. "I love you too," she whispered. When Christopher kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. It tasted like hope and felt like coming home. From her bedroom window above, Zoe watched them with satisfaction. Sometimes grown-ups needed help remembering how to believe in magic, but once they remembered, the best miracles were the ones they made together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and deeper healing. But tonight, under the stars that had witnessed so many of Zoe's healing sessions, love had worked its own kind of miracle. 2 weeks after Christopher's first steps, news of his recovery had begun to spread beyond the mansion walls. Dr. Williams, despite her attempts at discretion, had shared his case with the rehabilitation hospital where he had initially been treated. Word of his unprecedented improvement had reached colleagues, researchers, and eventually journalists. Christopher stood at his office window, using a walking cane for support as he watched Zoe tend her herb garden. His progress had been remarkable. He could now walk short distances independently and was growing stronger each day. But with his recovery had come unwanted attention and growing pressure. "Mr. Kane, we have a problem," Tom Bradley said as he entered the office carrying a tablet and looking more worried than usual. "The medical community is asking questions. Some are calling your recovery miraculous, but others are suggesting it's fraudulent." Christopher turned from the window. "Fraudulent how?" "They're theorizing that your paralysis was psychological rather than physical, or that you've been exaggerating your condition for insurance purposes. There are rumors about bringing in a medical review board to investigate." "Let them investigate. They'll find that my original diagnosis was accurate and my recovery is real." "That's not the only issue." Tom hesitated. "Some reporters have discovered information about Nia and Zoe. About how they came to live here, about Zoe's unusual reputation among the staff." Christopher felt a chill of protective anger. "What kind of information?" "They're portraying it as a story about exploitation. A desperate single mother using her child's supposed psychic abilities to manipulate a wealthy disabled man. The headlines are unpleasant." Before Christopher could respond, Nia appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale and she was holding a newspaper with shaking hands. "Christopher, we need to talk," she said quietly. Tom excused himself as Nia entered and closed the door behind her. She handed Christopher the newspaper, open to an article with a headline that made his stomach turn. "Paralyzed Billionaire's Miracle Cure? Child Psychic Scam or Medical Fraud?" Christopher scanned the article quickly, his anger building with each paragraph. The reporter had painted Nia as a conniving opportunist who had used her daughter to gain access to wealth and luxury. Zoe was described as either a trained con artist or a delusional child being exploited by her mother. "This is garbage," Christopher said firmly, throwing the paper aside. "No one who knows you or Zoe would believe this nonsense." "But people don't know us," Nia said, sinking into a chair. "They see a poor black woman living in a billionaire's mansion and they assume the worst. And now Zoe is being dragged into it." "Where is she now?" "In the garden with Pete and Mrs. Rodriguez. She doesn't know about the articles yet, but—" Nia's voice broke. "Christopher, maybe we should leave. Maybe this attention is too dangerous for all of us." "Absolutely not." Christopher's voice was firm. "You're not running away because some hack journalist decided to write sensational lies. It's not just one journalist. Tom says there are others looking into the story. And what if they're right? What if people think I used Zoe to manipulate you?" Christopher moved to kneel beside her chair, his recently regained mobility allowing him to look directly into her eyes. "Nia, listen to me. I know the truth. I know what Zoe's gift has done for me, for everyone in this house. I know what you mean to me. Nothing anyone writes in a newspaper can change that. But what if officials get involved? What if they try to take Zoe away, claiming I'm exploiting her?" The fear in her voice was heartbreaking. Christopher took her hands in his, feeling the tremor that ran through her fingers. "I won't let that happen. I have resources, lawyers, influence. No one is taking Zoe from you." Their conversation was interrupted by Helen Kane entering the office. Her face was set in grim lines, and she carried several more newspapers and printouts of online articles. "Christopher, this is becoming a circus," she said without preamble. "I've had 3 reporters call the house this morning, and there's a television van parked outside the front gates." "What are they saying?" Nia asked, though she looked like she dreaded the answer. Helen's expression softened as she looked at Nia. "They're saying terrible things that aren't worth repeating. But there's something else." She paused. "The state medical board wants to interview Zoe. They're calling it a welfare check, but they're clearly investigating whether she's being coached or exploited." Nia stood up abruptly, panic clear in her movements. "When?" "They want to meet with her tomorrow." "I won't let them interrogate a 5-year-old, Christopher said firmly. "She hasn't done anything wrong." "They're not looking for wrongdoing on her part," Helen said gently. "They're looking for evidence that she's being used by adults." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Zoe, who had spent weeks healing everyone around her with pure love and innocence, was now being portrayed as either a fraud or a victim. I should take her away, Nia said, moving toward the door. We can disappear before tomorrow. I won't let them hurt her. Stop. Christopher's voice was sharp enough to halt her. Running away makes you look guilty. We're going to face this together as a family. Are we a family? Nia asked, and the vulnerability in her voice nearly broke his heart. Or are we just people who got caught up in something bigger than we understood? Before Christopher could answer, Zoe herself appeared in the doorway. She was holding a handful of freshly picked herbs and had dirt under her fingernails, but her expression was troubled. Why is everyone sad? She asked, looking around the room. I could feel the worried feelings all the way from the garden. Nia immediately knelt beside her daughter, forcing a smile. We're not sad, sweetheart. We're just having a grown-up talk. But Zoe's gift extended beyond physical healing. She could read emotions as clearly as she could diagnose ailments. People are saying mean things about us, aren't they? The adults exchanged glances. There was no point in lying to a child who could sense truth as easily as breathing. Some people don't understand your gift, Christopher said gently. They're afraid of things they can't explain. Zoe nodded as if she had expected this. Grandmama told me that would happen. She said people get scared when they see real miracles because it means they have to believe in magic again. What else did your grandmother tell you? Helen asked, drawn into the conversation despite herself. She said that when people try to stop the healing, that's when it's most important to keep doing it. Because the world needs miracles, especially when everything seems dark. As Zoe spoke, her simple wisdom seemed to fill the room with calm. The panic that had been building in the adults began to subside, replaced by something steadier, determination. So what do we do? Nia asked. Zoe smiled, that radiant expression that had been lighting up the mansion for months. We tell the truth. We show them what real healing looks like. And we don't let the scared people stop us from helping others. Christopher looked around the room at his chosen family, his mother who had learned to believe in miracles, Nia who had taught him to love again, and Zoe who had given them all the gift of hope. She's right, he said. We tell the truth. All of it. And we trust that love is stronger than fear. As they spent the evening preparing for the next day's challenges, Christopher realized that this test of their faith might be exactly what they needed. It was time to stop hiding Zoe's gift and start sharing it with a world that desperately needed healing. The real miracle wasn't just that he could walk again. It was that they had found each other and chosen to become a family. And that was worth fighting for. The next morning arrived with a tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the Kane mansion. State Medical Board officials Dr. Elizabeth Sherman and Dr. Michael Rodriguez had arrived at precisely 9 o'clock, accompanied by a child welfare specialist named Janet Hayes. Their mission was clear: determine whether 5-year-old Zoe Washington was being exploited or coached in an elaborate deception. Christopher sat in his study with Nia, both of them watching through the window as Zoe played in her herb garden, completely unaware that her entire future hung in the balance. She was singing softly to her plants, the same melody her grandmother had taught her, while carefully watering each row. She doesn't know how scared we are, Nia said quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. That's probably for the best, Christopher replied, though his own anxiety was clear in the tension around his eyes. She should just be herself. That's all we can ask. Helen entered the study, followed by Dr. Williams, who had arrived early to provide Christopher's complete medical history to the investigating team. They're ready to begin, Helen announced. They want to speak with Christopher first, then Nia, and finally Zoe. The interview with Christopher was thorough and clinical. Dr. Sherman, a stern woman in her 50s, reviewed his medical records while Dr. Rodriguez tested his current mobility and reflexes. According to your original diagnosis, the damage to your spinal cord was extensive, Dr. Sherman said, reviewing charts on her tablet. Your doctors classified your case as complete paralysis with no possibility of recovery. That's correct, Christopher confirmed. Yet here you are, walking with minimal assistance after less than 3 months. How do you explain this recovery? Christopher met her gaze steadily. Zoe Washington has a gift for healing. I know that sounds unscientific, but I've experienced it firsthand, as have many members of my household staff. You're asking us to believe that a 5-year-old child can cure paralysis through some kind of supernatural ability? I'm asking you to observe her work and draw your own conclusions. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from his examination notes. Mr. Kane, your muscle tone and nerve responses are consistent with someone who has never been paralyzed. Are you certain your original diagnosis was accurate? Before Christopher could answer, Dr. Williams stepped forward. I can address that question. I've been Christopher's physician throughout his recovery, and I have complete documentation of his condition from the day of his accident through yesterday. The paralysis was real and the recovery is genuine. When it was Nia's turn to be interviewed, Janet Hayes, the child welfare specialist, took the lead. She was a middle-aged African-American woman with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. Mrs. Washington, how did you come to live in this mansion? Nia told the truth. About being caught taking expired medication for Zoe's fever, about Zoe's spontaneous promise to heal Christopher, about his offer to let them stay while Zoe attempted to fulfill that promise. And you believed your 5-year-old daughter could cure a paralyzed man? I believed in my daughter, Nia said simply. She had shown healing abilities before with my mother and with neighbors in our community. I didn't know if she could help Mr. Kane, but I trusted her enough to try. Some people might say that you're using your daughter's supposed abilities to secure a comfortable lifestyle for yourself. Nia's composure cracked slightly. I'm not using anyone. Zoe insisted on helping Mr. Kane. She's always been drawn to people who are hurting whether they're rich or poor. That's who she is. But you can't deny that your living situation has improved dramatically since making this arrangement. Yes, it has. And I'm grateful for that. But I would be just as proud of Zoe if we were still living in our one-room apartment and she was healing our neighbors for free. Which is what she was doing before we came here. Finally, it was Zoe's turn. The little girl entered the study wearing a simple yellow dress, her hair braided with small flowers from her garden. She showed no sign of nervousness as she looked around at the official-looking adults. Hello, she said politely. Are you here to learn about healing? Dr. Sherman leaned forward. We're here to ask you some questions, Zoe. Is that okay? Sure. Questions help people understand things better. Can you tell us about your healing abilities? Zoe tilted her head thoughtfully. It's not really abilities. It's more like listening. I listen to what people's bodies are trying to say, and then I help them remember how to feel better. Who taught you to do this? My great-grandmama mostly. But some of it just comes from inside. Like how birds know how to build nests without anyone teaching them. Janet Hayes spoke gently. Zoe, do you ever feel like adults are making you use your healing to do things you don't want to do? No. I only help people when I want to help them. Nobody can make me heal if I don't want to. What about Mr. Kane? Did your mother tell you to help him? Zoe shook her head emphatically. Mama was scared when we first came here. She kept telling me not to bother Mr. Christopher. But I could see he was hurting, so I wanted to help him. And how did you know he was hurting? His sadness was really loud. Louder than his hurt legs. That's what I fixed first, the sadness. The leg fixing came after. Dr. Rodriguez looked intrigued despite himself. Can you show us what you mean? Can you tell us what you sense about the people in this room? Zoe looked around the room carefully, her young face serious with concentration. Dr. Sherman, your back hurts from sitting at computers too much. And you have worry headaches because your daughter is having trouble at school. Dr. Sherman's professional mask slipped slightly. Her daughter was indeed struggling with bullying issues at school, something she hadn't mentioned to anyone at work. Mr. Hayes, Zoe continued looking at Janet, your knees hurt when it rains and you get sad sometimes because you miss your husband who died. Janet's eyes filled with tears. Her husband had passed away 2 years earlier, and she did indeed suffer from arthritis that flared up with weather changes. And Dr. Rodriguez, you have stomach problems when you're stressed, and you're worried about your father who is in the hospital right now. Dr. Rodriguez stared at the child in amazement. His father had been hospitalized with heart problems just 3 days earlier, information that hadn't appeared in any background check. How could you possibly know those things? Dr. Sherman asked, her skepticism wavering. I told you. I listen. People's hurt feelings and hurt bodies make different kinds of sounds. If you pay attention, you can hear them. Would you like me to help with any of your hurts? Zoe offered generously. I brought some herbs that might make you feel better. The three officials exchanged glances. They had come expecting to debunk a charlatan or rescue an exploited child. Instead, they had encountered something that challenged everything they thought they knew about healing and human potential. Zoe, Dr. Sherman said carefully, if we wanted to learn more about your abilities, would you be willing to work with some doctors and scientists? Zoe's face lit up. You mean help more people? That would be wonderful. Grandmama always said the gift is supposed to be shared with everyone who needs it. Christopher felt his heart swell with pride. Even facing official scrutiny, Zoe's first thought was about helping others. That afternoon, after hours of testing and observation, the officials reached their conclusion. Janet Hayes delivered their findings to the assembled family in the mansion's living room. Based on our interviews and observations, we find no evidence of exploitation or coaching, she announced. Zoe Washington appears to be a remarkably gifted child who genuinely wants to help people heal. Her abilities, whatever their source, seem to be authentic and voluntary. Dr. Sherman nodded reluctantly. While we can't explain her methods scientifically, we can't deny their effectiveness. We would like to arrange for Zoe to work with researchers at the University Medical Center, with your permission, to better understand her gift. Only if Zoe wants to, Nia said firmly. And only if it doesn't interfere with her normal childhood. Zoe clapped her hands together with excitement. I can help lots more people. Grandmama would be so happy. As the officials prepared to leave, Dr. Rodriguez approached Christopher privately. Mr. Kane, I owe you an apology. I came here expecting to find fraud. Instead, I've witnessed something that's going to change how I practice medicine. What do you mean? I mean, I'm going to start listening to my patients differently. Paying attention to their emotional pain as well as their physical symptoms. That little girl has reminded me that healing is about more than just medical procedures. That evening, as news of the official endorsement spread, Christopher found himself standing in Zoe's herb garden without his cane, his legs strong enough to support him completely. Nia stood beside him, and Zoe sat on a garden bench, finally looking tired after the long day. So what happens now? Nia asked. Now we keep doing what we've been doing, Christopher said. We help people heal. We love each other. And we trust that everything else will work out. Zoe looked up at them with tired but happy eyes. Mr. Christopher, do you want to know the best part about today? What's that, sweetheart? You walked all the way out here without your cane. Your legs are completely better now. Christopher realized she was right. For the first time in 3 years, he was standing and walking without any assistance at all. The healing was complete. Thank you, he said, kneeling down to hug the remarkable little girl who had given him back his life. For everything. You don't have to thank me, Zoe said, hugging him back. That's what families do. They take care of each other. As they walked back to the mansion together, Christopher knew that the greatest miracle wasn't his healed legs or Zoe's extraordinary gift. The greatest miracle was that 3 broken people had found each other and chosen to become whole together. 6 months later, the Kane mansion had been transformed from a private residence into something resembling a healing center. The formal dining room had been converted into a consultation space where Zoe met with people who traveled from across the country seeking her help. The conservatory had become a treatment room filled with the herbs she grew in her ever-expanding garden. Christopher stood at his office window, now completely mobile and stronger than he had been before his accident, watching as Zoe worked with a little boy who had been born with cerebral palsy. Her methods hadn't changed. Gentle touch, herbal remedies, and an inexplicable ability to help people's bodies remember how to heal themselves. Mr. Kane? Tom Bradley appeared in the doorway holding a thick folder. The university research team has completed their preliminary report on Zoe's work. Christopher turned from the window, accepting the folder. Over the past months, Zoe had been working with medical researchers who were attempting to document and understand her healing abilities. The arrangement allowed her to help more people while contributing to scientific understanding of alternative healing methods. What did they find? Remarkable success rates with chronic pain conditions, autoimmune disorders, and neurological issues, Tom summarized. They still can't explain how she does what she does, but they can't argue with the results. Christopher smiled, thinking of Dr. Sherman's complete transformation from skeptic to advocate. The stern medical board official had become one of Zoe's most vocal supporters after the little girl had helped her daughter overcome debilitating anxiety attacks. Any word from the documentary team? They'll be here next week to film the final interviews. The producer says this story is going to change how people think about healing and the power of belief. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nia entered, wearing the elegant blue dress Christopher had bought her for their engagement photos. Even after all these months, she sometimes seemed surprised by her new life, but she had grown into her role as both Christopher's partner and Zoe's advocate with natural grace. Christopher, we need to make a decision about the ceremony, she said, referring to their upcoming wedding. The planners want to know if we're having it here at the mansion or at the church. What does Zoe think? Christopher asked. Over the months, they had learned to include the little girl in most major decisions, trusting her instincts about what felt right. She thinks we should have it in the garden, where all her healing herbs can be our witnesses, Nia laughed. She's convinced that will bring extra blessings to our marriage. Then the garden it is, Christopher said without hesitation. Have I mentioned lately that I love how our daughter thinks? The casual way he referred to Zoe as our daughter still made Nia's heart skip. The adoption papers had been filed months ago, making their unconventional family legally official. Are you feeling inspired by this incredible journey of love and healing? Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments about whether you believe in the power of miracles. Stories like this remind us that magic can happen when we open our hearts to possibility. Their conversation was interrupted by Helen Kane entering with her arms full of wedding planning materials. In the months since Zoe's gift had been validated, Helen had thrown herself into planning what she called the wedding of the century. I hope you're prepared for quite a guest list, Helen announced, spreading fabric samples across Christopher's desk. We have acceptances from 3 research teams, 2 documentary crews, half the medical staff from 5 hospitals, and practically every person Zoe has ever healed. That sounds perfect, Nia said. Everyone who's been part of our journey should be there to celebrate. Speaking of celebrations, Christopher said, pulling a small velvet box from his desk drawer, I have something for someone special. He walked out to the garden, where Zoe was just finishing her session with the little boy with cerebral palsy. The child was taking halting but definite steps while his parents watched with tears of joy streaming down their faces. Zoe, can I talk to you for a minute? Christopher called. She skipped over to him, her face glowing with the satisfaction that always followed a successful healing. Did you see? Tommy took 4 whole steps by himself. His legs are remembering how to be strong. I saw. You did wonderful work. Christopher knelt down to her eye level. I wanted to give you something special before the wedding. He opened the velvet box to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a flower. This was my grandmother's. She was a special woman who believed in helping others just like you do. I want you to have it. Zoe's eyes widened as Christopher fastened the necklace around her neck. It's beautiful. But Mr. Christopher, I don't need presents. Having you as my daddy is the best present ever. Christopher felt his throat tighten with emotion. And having you as my daughter is the greatest gift I could ever receive. Do you think Grandmama would be happy about the wedding? Zoe asked, touching the pendant gently. I know she would. She's probably watching over us right now, smiling about how our family came together. That evening, as the household settled into their nighttime routines, Christopher found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had been a broken, bitter man who had given up on the possibility of happiness. Now he was surrounded by love, purpose, and the daily miracle of watching his daughter heal a world that desperately needed hope. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with late spring sunshine warming the air and making Zoe's herb garden glow like something from a fairy tale. Chairs had been arranged among the flowering plants, creating an intimate amphitheater where their extended family could gather to witness their vows. Christopher stood at the improvised altar, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit and feeling more nervous than he had for any business deal in his life. But when the music began and he saw Nia walking toward him in a flowing white dress, with Zoe beside her carrying a basket of healing herbs instead of traditional flowers, every worry melted away. You look beautiful, he whispered as Nia took his hands. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, her eyes sparkling with happiness. The ceremony was performed by Dr. Williams, who had gotten ordained online specifically to marry them. Her words about love, healing, and the power of chosen family resonated with everyone present. Christopher and Nia, Dr. Williams said, you've taught us all that the greatest healing happens when we open our hearts to love. Your journey together proves that miracles aren't just possible, they're inevitable when we choose hope over fear. When it came time for the exchange of vows, Christopher looked into Nia's eyes and spoke from his heart. Nia, you and Zoe didn't just heal my body. You healed my soul. You taught me that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that families aren't just born, they're chosen. I promise to love you both, to protect you both, and to spend every day proving that fairy tales can come true. Nia's vows were equally heartfelt. Christopher, you gave us a home when we had nowhere to go. But more than that, you gave us hope. You believed in Zoe's gift when others doubted, and you believed in my love when I was too scared to believe in it myself. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams, and to love you for the rest of my life. When they kissed, officially becoming husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause and cheers. Zoe threw her healing herbs into the air like confetti, laughing as the fragrant petals rained down on the celebrating guests. But the biggest surprise came during the reception, when Christopher stood to make a speech. Nia and I have an announcement, he said, taking his wife's hand. We've decided to establish the Zoe Washington Foundation for Alternative Healing. The foundation will provide funding for research into non-traditional healing methods, and will offer free healing services to people who can't afford medical care. The applause was thunderous, but Christopher wasn't finished. We're also converting the west wing of the mansion into a permanent healing center, where Zoe and other gifted healers can work with people who need help. Because we've learned that miracles should never be kept to ourselves. As the celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing under the stars, Zoe found herself surrounded by people whose lives she had touched. Pete Thompson, who now moved without arthritis pain. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose migraines were a distant memory. Dr. Sherman's daughter, who had overcome her anxiety and was thriving in school. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" Nia asked, sitting beside her daughter at the edge of the garden. "I'm happy," Zoe said, but her expression was thoughtful. "And I think Grandmama is happy too. She told me in my dream last night that our real work is just beginning." Christopher joined them, loosening his tie and settling onto the grass beside his new family. "What kind of work?" "Helping people remember that love can heal anything," Zoe said simply. "There are so many people out there who forgot how to believe in miracles. We need to show them." As they sat together in the garden that had become the heart of their healing work, watching their wedding guests celebrate under the starlight, Christopher realized that their story wasn't ending with the wedding. It was just beginning. The little girl who had promised to heal a paralyzed billionaire had done far more than restore his ability to walk. She had healed his capacity to love, to hope, and to believe in the impossible. And now, as a family united by choice and strengthened by love, they were ready to share that miracle with a world that needed healing more than ever. In the distance, as if summoned by their happiness, they could hear the gentle sound of Zoe humming her grandmother's healing song. The melody carried on the night air like a promise that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to help, to heal, and to spread the kind of love that makes miracles possible. Their greatest adventure was just beginning.